Okay, so Nick Norton, composer, guitarist, crazy experimenter, and lots of other things in music. So can you tell us how you ended up in music and what have you been doing nowadays, your latest projects and everything?
Yeah. Well, how I ended up in music was by playing in bands probably by playing in the school band. In like third grade, I played saxophone and carried that all through high school. And I played in my own bands. I played guitar because I thought it would be cool. And in a rock band situation, you kind of all write the music together. In fact, the idea of composing is kind of not something that ever crosses your mind. You're just asking each other, oh, does this sound good next? And things like that. And then I went and majored in music in college at UC San Diego and randomly took a composition class and got hooked the first assignment. They had a flutist playing little short pieces we had written over the week, and the second he started playing my piece, I was like, oh, I like writing for other people. That's cool. So I kind of never looked back and went through grad school for it and all that. And, finding work as a composer, most composers teach, and I was doing that for a little while, but at least in the US, the job market is abusive and unpredictable and hard to find jobs and things like that. So I switched. I had picked up some skills in production and electronic music, so I switched to doing sound and editing of music for TV and film just a few years ago, just before the pandemic really started, actually. So my time was challenging.
So this transition from composition as a collective art form to an individual one, it happened quite naturally for you.
The thought process isn't all that different for me. It is still a lot of, well, what sounds good next, and how does that relate to the other material in the piece or the song or whatever? You're just alone.
You still play guitar, right?
Yeah, not as often as I'd like to, but I still do.
And how is the guitar inserted, in your opinion, within the huge American landscape? Apart from the things that everybody knows, in which sense that you think the guitar is inserted into your culture that people don't usually think about?
It's hard to answer that while ignoring the huge musical landscape of like American rock. And R&B and bluegrass and blues, and like it's our whole tradition is guitar based in some ways. But it finds its ways in other places that are more niche. You see it in a lot of experimental music because I think the tonal and timbral characteristics of the instrument are so broad that you can really make a guitar do anything. And obviously it's a polyphonic instrument, which is one thing that attracts me to it. Where it fits culturally, though, I think it's still, there's nothing like a Fender Telecaster,
True. And it's interesting, the guitar, I've been asking this question for other composers as well. And it's interesting that the guitar is probably the most eclectic instrument that we have. But in each different culture, it plays different roles, right?
Yeah.
It's present in different ways. It's always present, but in very different ways. And I was interested to see if, we all have lots of access to North American culture in general, like United States particularly. But if there is anything that you feel that people don't know about, that the guitar is there.
Lately, over the last few years, I think, especially with everyone being locked in their houses and bedrooms and stuff, ambient guitar has become a really big thing in the US, especially, the bits that you pick up on social media and stuff like that. Yeah. There are a lot of people playing with 4 delays and 3 reverbs, and you play one note and get a minute of a piece out of it. That's become quite popular, and I think it's a really cool thing because it allows for a lot of creativity with the effects and the pedals and stuff like that, which in my mind have always been an integral part of the sound of the guitar. Yeah, I mean, I know obviously you stick to the classical guitar, but I'm an electric guitarist, and your amp selection and your distortion selection and your reverb selection, those are all things that are really personally affect your tone and the color of the instrument.
So you feel that there's still a lot of experimentation going on, even an electric guitar that's like experimental by nature, let's say. There's still lots of things coming up from. And actually, that actually leads us to your piece, to Connection, that you wrote for WGC. And it's interesting to think that even within a classical guitar, as we call classical guitar, technique and universe, you actually managed to find some very interesting way out. Some very interesting things that you wanted to say with the piece, right? And I remember there was a bit of a drama at the beginning that you had to get rid of some of your initial ideas.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing was, you had collected all these recordings from all over the world, and I had a few of my own. I was starting with the recordings each time and saying like, oh, how does this sound fit with this other sound? And I'd come up with something that I liked. And then when I got to what's the guitar gonna do? No matter what I did, it sounded like it didn't fit to me. Like it was kind of like karaoke. Like here's a background of sounds and here's a guitar, as opposed to here's sounds with a guitar.
Yes.
Which is, what you want is this kind of holistic thing out of a piece. Or what I wanted at the time was a holistic thing out of the piece. So after a few drafts that I threw out, I switched the process to thinking of it kind of like a concerto, where you would write the solo part first, or get the solo ideas first at least, and then accompany them. So I wrote almost the whole guitar piece as a solo, and then found recordings and parts of the recordings that would complement it. With the exception of the ending, when there's that kind of folk song bit, that's lifted from one of the folk songs in the background of one of your recordings.
It's in New York actually. Cool. I recorded next to the cathedral. It was a choir in the street that was singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful, man. And I was really happy that you chose that. During my first world tour with WGC, I had a layover in LA. And then we spent the day together, basically. We were going around, you were showing me around. And then we talked about that, right? I told you about these recordings. And then my idea was always for the next season of WGC, in this case, WGC Beyond, that will become WGC Beyond, to have the first piece to, connect the world. Right? Because the whole idea of WGC was always this connection thing. And you accepted the challenge right away, and I was very happy with that. And it's interesting as well that in the next season, when Connection was already all recorded, etc., we had two versions basically of the piece. One that was the recorded one, and the live performances of the piece that were like almost completely different feeling. Right? Yesterday, actually, I was listening to the recorded version. And then I watched one of my performances. I was imagining me in the audience, etc. And it's like, wow, that doesn't quite work quite the same. It's
they're different. I've heard it. Yeah. It's been performed by a few other guitarists, so I've gotten to hear it live, because I've never heard you play it live besides the recordings you've done me. And it's very different. There
was one situation in Hong Kong where it was the very first piece of the concert, right? And then they created a surround thing. Well, it's Hong Kong, so you would expect this kind of things. So they created super cool thing with many speakers, etc. And then I thought, that's it. It cannot be something like shy. It has to be something like properly done with surround, etc. And then it's like immersive, like a concerto for guitar and electroacoustic, electronics. And then I thought, okay, so that maybe this is what Nick had in mind. Right?
Yeah, well, I've done some work in live sound, providing speakers and microphones and things like that for concerts. And I do think about that when I'm composing is, how is this going to be presented? And especially when there are electronic elements, with acoustic elements, I try to think ahead and, recommend how to mic the instruments or how to blend them with the speakers and things like that, because that's what is reaching the audience's ears ultimately. I think if you just make a track and write an instrumental part and hand off those two things, you're kind of not done if you're writing electroacoustic music.
And did you get involved in the technical support of these other performances of Connection?
I think both were at UCSB while I was doing my PhD there, by visiting guitarists. And I think all I really did was mic the guitar and turn up the reverb so it would blend with the backing track, because they just had a stereo system there.
It's a piece that's still open for experimentation, in terms of layout as well, in terms of
totally
electronic setup and the layout of the concert itself.
I would be happy to find out what they did in Hong Kong, actually.
It was actually a normal concert, but they actually distributed the speakers around the audience, but it was a big theater, so the effect was like gigantic. It was really, really cool. And have you tried your hand on something like that again, like this kind of acoustic and electronics combination?
I've got a piece for Wagner tuba and electronics that you can also play it on muted horn and electronics. It's close enough. As far as I know, it's the only piece for Wagner tuba and electronics. It was commissioned by and I've done some piano and electronics. I've got a big piece that my friends in Hockett, a piano duo, have played that it's much heavier electronics, like loud, noisy synthesizers with piano, and it's very minimalist kind of early Philip Glass, with the synth coming in, that kind of thing. And then I've done some more soundscapey pieces. I do really like crickets. I've used them in more than one situation.
They are very promising, I have to say.
Yes.
When you think of crickets in terms of rhythm, they offer lots of possibilities. It's really cool. Yeah,
I've used them in one other piece, but in that piece, it's only crickets, and it just runs the entire time. So I like it when that piece is first on a program, because then you can have the cricket sound just going while the audience is taking their seats and hanging out and stuff and eventually the musicians come on stage, and it works pretty effectively. That piece is called Three Graces at Perigee, and there is a recording of that out. It's on my website.
Okay. But what fascinates you in cricket sound?
I did grow up with them at night. Actually, when I added them to that other piece, Three Graces at Perigee, I had been composing it late at night, and then I would listen back to the MIDI playback the next day, and I'd be like, why was this so much better last night than it is now? And then I realized it was the cricket sound through the window playing with the piece that I like so much. So I just went outside and recorded for 10 minutes and came back in, and it fixed it. It was like, oh yeah, that's the piece. I've been working in sound and in editing music for TV film. There are a lot of jobs in it here. I still have to get into the union, so I've been working on reality shows and sitcoms and stuff like that. But editing dialogue, editing sound effects in, and music editing is the main thing, which is, for instance, if you have a scene that's 28 seconds long and music behind the scene, like say the characters are in a bar or something like that, that is longer than 28 seconds, but the producer wants it to end with a chorus or something, it's cutting it to make it fit and things like that. So it's kind of like doing puzzles.
I can imagine the amount of work that...
There's a lot of it that's kind of administrative, like most jobs have there. So there can be a good bit that's administrative, but it feels creative, but not so creative that it takes away from my composing. I just finished a piece for chamber orchestra that I hope will get played. That's always a challenge. And I've got a new string quartet and a new piano piece. I've been composing a lot, actually.
And Nick, there's WGC is a collaborative project, as you know, and it was born out of this idea that collaboration is cool. Basically, collaboration can make things happen. Yeah,
I agree.
And it's not just because, not. Of course, money is important, etc. But it is cool to collaborate and create something together, right?
Yeah.
As I've done with other composers and other professions as well, right? And WGC has connections in the name, in its very, very essence. And nowadays we are living in a world that it's, of course, super connected. It's a post-globalized world, and connections are like that quick, everything very superficial as well, many times. You've been around in music production, in music composition, in music performance, etc. You know your ways around music very well.
Thank you.
Do you have this feeling that there is something that music still has a potential to touch, to connect to? Is there any kind of technology, science, education, or anything like that? Is there any area that you think that music should be more present, and it would be a good thing for humanity that if it was?
Well, in the U.S. at least, our music education is pretty minimal. It's not required anywhere, as far as I know, and I think that would be, just flat out music education at a young age. It's shown to have all these benefits, like it makes kids better at math or critical thinking or whatever. But I think if we focus on that, we kind of lose the point a little bit, which is that music itself is a valuable skill to have. So there is that. And then I want to make a little bit of a distinction, because we are so interconnected, and you and I can do a project between Brazil, London, and LA without ever seeing each other in person, except for one day. And that's really amazing. But since concerts have started up again, I've only gone to 2 or 3, and they've been in the kind of new classical, experimental, whatever you want to call it, scene in LA, and the sense of camaraderie of being back in a live room and hearing something in person is so powerful that I'm sure there are plenty of places music can go, and probably will, and it is really everywhere. Sometimes it's a little music-y, we do have music in elevators and in the background of every sporting event and commercial and whatnot. So it's not like music's hurting for places to go, but I think live music after the pandemic is something that if it's over, is something that I'm really excited about again.
So have you been looking around to see if there are any new ways that people are presenting, and new ways people are, is it back to the old style, and people are just happy that it's back to the old style?
It's been pretty much back to what it feels like before, because I got to admit this, and I'm really sorry to say it, but so many people were doing live streams and putting effort into that, and oh man, I just didn't care to sit there in front of my computer and watch them anymore. Even if I had a piece on it, I'd be like, yeah, that was great. That was the same as if you sent me a phone recording of you playing the piece,
What actually put me off a lot during the pandemics, during both lockdowns, and particularly here in London, and I'm still finishing a PhD at this point, and I still have contact with lots of young performers, etc. And then first week of lockdown, okay, so the thing that you see the most, it was like little squares. Yeah.
Sure.
So we have people playing together. Oh no, let's play with another person on the other side of the world. Oh, that's so emotive, etc. Like before, they couldn't do that. You know?
Yeah.
So it became like a kind of a static of such a bad taste. You know that kept going and going and going. And I was kind of looking around, saying, like, is it only me who is like really, concerned about what people are doing, and if people will keep doing that afterwards, etc. And I was actually a little bit like concerned about how it would be going back to live concerts, and I can see what I can see in London is actually okay. So it is going back to.
Yeah, not solely back to its old self though. Like there are a lot of people doing concerts now that are simultaneously live streamed or doing programs.
Yes, exactly. That was my next.
And I think that's pretty cool. Like it's not the same. It feels the same if you're there in person.
Exactly, but that's my point. That's the kind of connections that I wanted to talk about. Well, this is the kind of connection that we were forced to have, basically. And then it became something else, like this hybrid state of being a performer. And do you think that this hybrid model is something that came to stay, or do you think that this collaboration between music and technology is at its limit, or there's no?
Oh no, it's here to stay. I mean, we're gonna see. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing or just a thing, because sometimes things just happen that change society forever. And I don't think like Facebook's Meta platform is really there yet, or that people care about it that much. But I think virtual reality concerts are certainly going to be a thing in the future. Especially if you can only sell so many tickets to a venue but then have viewers feeling like they're there from home somehow. I'm sure we're going to see something like that. Yeah.
And we'll naturally have to rethink about the word connection, probably, right? And what is a connection, right?
Yes.
And how do you imagine that would be to compose for such a state of such a hybrid or completely virtual world?
It's interesting because I work in sound, I would want to think about how the listeners are receiving the music ultimately. If there's all this talk about immersive audio and Dolby Atmos and things like that most composers going to music school aren't really studying. They're studying scores and orchestration and how to put on a performance working with the musicians directly, but maybe not thinking, well, what happens if a listener turns their head to the speakers while they're sitting on their couch, But that is now, I think, something that is going to affect how listeners receive music and how much composers want to interface with that. I guess that's up to each composer individually, but I would think it's pretty important to know something about it so that you can write to have your music received the way you want it to be received, which ultimately you have no control over anyway, and that's a hard thing to accept and learn. But you can get a little closer. Yeah.
Would you compose for a completely virtual space?
I've composed a few sound installations. You participated in one of the first ones. And that was just for stereo. But I'm doing a lot now with kind of generative music, especially with Ableton. And sometimes music like that doesn't necessarily have a beginning, middle, or end. Because it's being generated in real time. Sometimes it can feel a little flat, but interesting. And for stuff like that, I think presenting it in a virtual space, like a video game space, maybe, or virtual reality, or in like a museum with 8 speakers or something like that, could be the best fit for it, actually.
Yeah, maybe installations would be a better solution than concerts in virtual reality, right?
I think virtual reality installations are a really cool idea, and I've heard they're not even very hard to do if you learn how to program video games a little bit.
Imagine the dynamics of a concert. Of course, you can go there. Yeah, go there, etc. But I can imagine as something that's much more immersive, as you say, as an installation would be a better solution. Do you know any project or anyone who is doing something like that?
David Kanega. He's mostly a video game composer, from what I understand, but he worked on I wish I knew the name of it. He worked on a game that was musical, that you were kind of exploring this island, and the trees would make some sounds, and the water would have a sound, and the rocks would have a sound, and as you walked around, the kind of soundscape changed. It was really cool. Just look up David Kanega with a K, and I'm sure you'll see lots of stuff.
So maybe one day we can have connection for a version of connection for virtual reality. Huh?
The idea of spatial audio in a concert situation is it's coming up. I think it's not quite everywhere yet, but I think for your LA, New York, London giant venues that can afford that many speakers, it's definitely going to be a thing.
Well, maybe next time I go to LA, we can think about something.
Yeah, that could be cool.
With a bigger connection. Connection to revival. Very nice to talk to you. Thank you very much. We will watch some of my old performances of Connection next.
Cool.
And well, I hope you're keeping well and
thank you. You too.
And I hope to meet you in some of my other tours if you come to London.
All right. Thanks, Fabrício. Great to talk to you.
See you then. Great to talk to you too.
See you. Cheers.
านเลยใช่ไหม
ค่ะ
มีเยอะไหมเยอะเลยใช่ไหม
มีเยอะ มีทั้งชูชก
เอาที่นี่คือวัดนี้ถ้ากุมารทองต้องวัดนี้ฮะวัดนี้ดังสุดใช่ไหม
เขาไปเอากันที่นั่นมาเป็นพวกสาลิกาพวกกุมารชก
เดี๋ยวไปดูขอบคุณครับวัดป้อมนามันนะคนวัดเล็กๆเลยใช่ไหมวัดเนี้ย
ไม่เล็กนะวัดใหญ่นะ
ที่มันข้ามมะพร้าวลงไปเป็นหลุมๆเนี่ยวัดเนี้ยมันใช่ไหมนี่วัดป้อมนามันอาจจะติดข้ามมะพร้าวมีเยอะไหมที่นี่คือวัดเล็กๆเลยใช่ไหมที่มันข้ามมะพร้าวลงไป
Até quando você vai aguentar esses juros altíssimos? Até quando vai aceitar pagar por 3, mas ficar com apenas uma casa? Até quando não vai enxergar que um consórcio pode ser uma opção de investimento? Coisa mais sem cabimento. Até quando vai acreditar que para ser moderno tem que ser só digital? Não é melhor ter serviços online e, se precisar, atendimento presencial? Até quando você vai esperar para falar com a gente? Uma única marca, há 30 anos, especialista em consórcio. A Demicon.